Toolkits for innovation search. Now we know that there are many different sources of innovation, and therefore we have a challenge. With limited resources, we can't look for everything. We need some kind of a strategy, some frameworks to help us look for possibilities. And the good news is there are plenty available. We've seen, for example, the need to explore as widely as possible in our innovation space, and one tool to help with that is the 4 Ps, the Innovation Compass, which suggests that we look at what we offer the world, our products and services, our processes, the ways we create and deliver those offerings, our market position, and our underlying mental model, our paradigm. Asking questions around this helps focus our attention on where we might innovate. And we can also expand that by thinking about our core, the things we do today, the adjacent world where we might begin to play tomorrow, and right at the edge, the periphery, where there may be some very unexpected opportunities. And we can take this approach with the 4 Ps, looking also in terms of timing, at the here and now, at the immediate future, and stretching out to the longer term. So there's already quite a framework, or a set of frameworks we can use to help think about where we might find our innovation opportunities. Now, the good news is we have got many different tools available to help us do this. If the frameworks help us identify where it might be useful to be prospecting, the tools will help us dig deeper and actually find out if there is anything useful. And the good news is also that there are tools for those various different time frames. We can think, for example, about tools that help us with the catching up challenge, essentially catching up with a frontier, incremental innovation, doing what we do better, catching up with what users need, catching up with what competitors do, catching up with the limits of our established processes. But we can also think about tools which help us go beyond the frontier to create something completely new. And we can think about tools which help us look right beyond, right at the very edge, at our periphery, in terms of where we might play in a different fashion. So let's look at these toolkits very briefly here, and then we can look in more detail at how we might actually use some of them. In terms of doing what we do better, there are many powerful tools around, particularly tools associated with process mapping. As the name suggests, making a map of how we do something, the various activities that help us do it, and then challenging that. Could we eliminate stages? Could we streamline things? Could we reroute? Close cousin of that are the various tools that were developed around continuous improvement. Originally from the quality movement, but these tools apply in many other areas, and they're essentially about improving, optimizing, getting closer to the frontier. Another powerful suite of tools has to do with benchmarking, systematic comparison of products, of services, of processes to try and find gaps and opportunities to close those gaps. We can do something similar in terms of market research by deploying the Voice of the Customer toolkit, the various market research tools that help us get closer to what it is that customers need and helping them articulate that more closely. We can also think about value curves, value profiles that help us compare between organizations in terms of what we offer and the ways we create those offers and how that compares in terms of others. We can also think about creating something new. Toolkits which help us stretch our thinking. Particularly, there's a number of tools available in the world of creativity, lateral thinking, metaphor, brainstorming, and so on, which help us imagine new possibilities. Also related there, the idea of looking to the future. Powerful, structured tools to help us think about futures and find opportunities there. Things like scenarios, Delphi methods which mobilize expert opinion, trend scouting, road mapping, and so on. Design thinking is a powerful suite of tools, a methodology which very much brings the user into the equation. Instead of creating something for a market and then trying to push it at the market, design thinking recognizes the coupling model of innovation and starts from the beginning to draw in user insights, to engage them in creating prototypes and reacting to them and becoming partners in the innovation process. And closely linked to that is the notion of working with active users, user innovators, and trying to catch their early insights to help us develop things which might have a wider application. Tools here include things like lead user methods, and more recently, the power of the internet to help us crowdsource things, and the power of innovation labs to draw users into the prototyping process. Another thing that organizations can do is to look systematically at what they know, their competencies, and where they might deploy that knowledge in new areas. Competency mapping and deployment. And another powerful link to that is, of course, that what we know about in our world may have value in someone else's, if we can jump across those sectoral or regional boundaries. And in reverse, there may be things going on there that might help our innovation in quite radical fashion. The last suite of tools is really around looking beyond the lamppost, stretching our thinking so that we look at the periphery, not just working with our existing selection environment, the technologies we watch, the markets we look at, the competitors we monitor, moving beyond that frame to think about innovation, bringing in very different elements. And once again, the good news is that there are many tools and techniques available for doing this. Peripheral vision toolkits of this kind include things like creativity and futures, essentially using those skills to create and imagine very different possibilities to the ones we work with now. Another approach is to take user innovation but find extreme users, people whose world exists very much at the fringe of ours, and find out what works and what's needed in their world as a driver for innovation. Another approach, which has very much been explored in the theme of disruptive innovation, is looking at markets which are not served or which are underserved, and trying to find the needs there that might be met in sometimes radically different ways. And that brings us very much to the idea of mobilizing the crowd. For the first time, with the reach of the internet, it's possible to get many thousands of minds looking at a problem and identifying perhaps unexpected routes forward. And an increasing use of innovation labs brings some members of that crowd together to help create sometimes very radical prototypes. So let's summarize where we've been in this video. Essentially, we need to search extensively. There are many sources of innovation, but we have limited resources. So we need frameworks, and those frameworks can help us mark out where it might be useful to start prospecting for innovation opportunities. But particularly valuable is having a set of tools, extensive suites of tools available to help us do the digging, do the mining for possibilities. Tools that help us catch up with the frontier, tools that help us push that frontier, and tools that help us look beyond the lamppost, sometimes to find potentially game-changing innovations.